Hi, I'm Deb Jackson, Executive Director of Old Town Playhouse. The Playhouse and the Traverse Area District Library are certainly two gems in our community, so we are proud to partner with the library on this project. The Importance of Being Earnest is a delightfully witty comedy by Oscar Wilde. The Playhouse performed it on main stage in 2019. When the library contacted us to see if we could record a table reading of a play for the enjoyment of their patrons, we thought we could do one better. So we recorded a table reading of The Importance of Being Earnest, costumed, and via Zoom for safety. We hope you enjoy this performance. I'd also like to take this opportunity to share some exciting news with you. Old Town Playhouse will again have theater under the tent in our parking lot this summer, and we'll have even more music events and live theater in the tent. And the exciting news is that we plan to reopen on main stage in the fall. Check our website and Facebook pages for upcoming show announcements. Now sit back, maybe pour yourself a spot of tea, and enjoy The Importance of Being Earnest.
No immobile. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Oh, oh, la, la. Do, 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 do. My, my dear Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Oh, got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful!
Oh, yes, that is all very well, but I am afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
Well, my dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one might be accepted. One usually is, I believe, and then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, my dear Algy. The default court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
But this is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as though you're going to eat it all. You behave as though you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that's nonsense.
No, it isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. Before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
You left this in the smoking room the last time you dined here.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Oh, I think that was rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I see that the thing is not yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this is not your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, a charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Yeah, just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is surely a matter an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yeah. But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Earnest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
But you have always told me it was Earnest. I have introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. You look as if your name was Ernest. It's on your card. You are the most earnest-looking person I have ever met. Here is one of them. Look, Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this card as proof your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me or to Gwendolen or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd best have the thing all out at once. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of the fact now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle from motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, resides in my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That's nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you might come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have really been engaged to dine with Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You would much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. I dined with her on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relatives. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with Mr. with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me to be extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and a happy English home has proved in half the time.
Well, for heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives and creditors ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you might have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, will you dine with me tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, I find the 2 things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart. Aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry for a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband died. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Oh, good heavens! I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers remaining.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living quite entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed colour. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out.
The fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I will speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Well, thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe it is so.
A charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always think they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I'd certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I have ever met. Since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that, in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I knew I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
Suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say, I think there's lots of much nicer names. I think, oh, Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. Oh, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. Oh, no, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent towards me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet.
Oh, well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What is it you have got to say to me?
Oh, well, you know what I've got to say to you?
Yes, but you don't. Say it.
Oh, Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Oh, of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
Oh, my own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, sir, rise from that semi-recumbent position. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Oh, pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, if his health should permit it, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a complete surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma?
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I'm afraid I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. What is your income?
Oh, between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What's between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with simple, unspoilt natures like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it's let out by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I'd like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham, I do not know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Oh, nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, well, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening, at any rate. Now, two minor matters. Are your parents living?
Oh, I've lost both my parents.
Both? Oh, Mr. Worthing, to lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
I'm afraid I don't really know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Well, yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles on it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at the Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, A cloakroom in a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. In fact, has probably been used for that purpose before now. But it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized place in good society.
May I ask what you would advise me to do, Lady Bracknell? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Tum tum ta tum, tum tum ta tum, tum tum ta tum.
Oh, goodness sakes, Algy, don't sing or hum that ghastly tune.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? But you don't mean to say that Gwendolyn refused? Well, I know it is a way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
No, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we are engaged. Her mother, on the other hand, is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. She's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algy. I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are merely a tedious pack of people who haven't got the smallest instinct of how to live, nor the remotest knowledge of when to die.
Oh, that's nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
Oh, all women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, my dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the ways to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that's nonsense.
What about your brother, the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. My poor brother Ernest will be carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought that you said Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's quite all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
Oh, one does not blurt these things out to people. Besides, Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to become extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like. Half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
Oh, no, I hate talking.
We might trot round to the Empire at 10.
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
What shall we do?
Nothing.
Upon my word. Gwendolyn.
Kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, I thought I told you to turn your back. You always adopt a strictly immoral attitude toward life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
My own darling.
Darling.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I've ever cared for in all my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
I'm just a little anxious about my poor friend Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care of your poor friend Bunbury, it will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Ooh, I love scrapes. They are the only thing that are never serious at all.
Oh, that's nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily? Cecily? Intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I always look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is, that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is particularly to be commended in one as comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty or responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety over that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him. Miss Prism, I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could have any effect on a character who, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Oh, I am not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. Cecily, you must put away your diary. I do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that the library sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in younger days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily.
Oh, well, the good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. Oh, I use the word in the case of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh, Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I did not say anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
Well, that is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
Oh, no. We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as is, by all accounts, that poor young man, his brother, seems to be. But alas, I must not interrupt Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. But I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a little stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. We might go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be lovely. Cecily, you will study your political economy in our absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Mr. Earnest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Oh, yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. And I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Well, I'm not really wicked at all, Cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, it is much pleasanter being here with you, Cousin Cecily.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement, but I still think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he's been wanting to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
About your emigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
Oh, I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd rather die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
Oh, that is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Oh, might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A yellow rose?
No, I'd sooner a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
Oh, I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
And Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that any sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear doctor. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand, but a womanthrope? Oh, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously why the primitive church has not lasted up to this day. And you do not seem to realize, doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
Well, that depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman, Doctor. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us back from the schools?
Oh. Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
Well, this is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chaswell, I hope you're well.
Well, dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
Oh, more shameless debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he shall profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincerest condolence.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I received a letter from the manager of the Grand Hotel last night.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
Ah, as a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? Well, that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last.
That reminds me, Dr. Chaswell, you mentioned christenings, I think. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the doctor's most pressing duties in this county. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there a particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes, but it's not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
Well, I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have.
The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is required, or indeed I think advisable, whether it is so changeable. At what hour would you like the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins occurring in outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man, is.
Well, I don't see much use in being christened with other babies. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer upon your house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of a particularly obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, oh, I'm pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
Oh, my child, no.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
Oh, it's nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. No matter how badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
Well, after we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother's in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. It's perfectly absurd to me.
Good heavens! Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury! Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side. However, I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness is particularly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering I have never been here before.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, it is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Yes, Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over. I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy, you've got to get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I hope that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 suitcases, 2 portmanteaus, a dressing case, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasure in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
Well, not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a week as a guest or as anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Where will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, it's better than always being overdressed as you are. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. I thought you were with Uncle Jack. He's gone to get the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part.
I'm afraid so. Oh, it is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite plainly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every possible way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
Oh, I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. That doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily?
The dog cart is at the door waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, you silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how on earth did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear little tree here. The next day, I bought this ring in your name. Oh, and here is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? Oh, it's very pretty, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all of your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote you always 3 times a week, sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautifully written and so badly spelled. Even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. on the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, especially considering the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
Oh, you dear romantic boy.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that we have actually met. And besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been somewhat of a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my dear child, do you mean to say that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name
Well,
Algernon.
well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling. I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not a bad name at all. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Why, half of the chaps who end up in bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algy, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly practiced and experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man.
I must see him at once on a very important christening. I mean, on very important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th and I've only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
A Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. You can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some philanthropic work in London.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short amount of time.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no. I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I am bound to state that now I know you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be and not quite so very alluring in appearance. I have liked you ever since I met you. In fact, if I may speak candidly, then
They do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
No, I am afraid you must be under some misconception. You see, Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. So if you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
You allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement. You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest to me, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say I have never seen a spade. Obvious our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here, as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? Don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
I had no idea there were so many flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl. But I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Thank you, Merriman.
Ugh! You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest.
Oh, Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
Oh, dear little Cecily, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may kiss me.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack. Oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Oh, good heavens, Gwendolyn?
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may kiss me.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh,
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I'd liked. I could deny anything if I'd liked. My name is certainly John. It's been John for years.
a gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it's very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. But I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother, Ernest. But I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life. And I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all.
None.
Are you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us in there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
I suppose this ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying?
Yes. And a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is too. The most pleasant, wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, and thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen. That is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I love her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that's no business of yours.
It was my business. I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only people like stockbrokers do that.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins, while we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins in a very calm manner. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless of you eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing which consoles me. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way. A man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said that it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are still the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to leave without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up on that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble this morning to be christened myself at 5:30, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Oh, Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I'd like. There's no evidence I've ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It's entirely different in your case. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That's the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. Besides, you can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but a severe chill is not hereditary.
It used to be. I dare say it is now. The science is always making such wonderful improvements on things.
Oh, that's nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. Besides, there is still one muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow me at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
We will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True, in matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
You doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. No.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not finish each other's sentences?
An excellent idea. I nearly always finish other people's sentences. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names?
Still and insuperable.
Beria.
That is all.
Our Christian names?
Is that all?
But we're going to
be christened?
this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
Oh, please me, are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
Darling.
Darling.
Good heavens!
What does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Sit down. Sit down immediately. Mr. Worthing, all communication between yourself and my daughter shall cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am clear.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
No, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. That is, the doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, and so that is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
And now that we've finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a most unnecessary manner?
Oh, that lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
Oh, Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square Southwest, Gervais Parking, Dorking, Surrey, and the Spore and Fiveshire.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses inspire confidence even in tradesmen.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby, a firm of the very highest in their profession.
Oh, well, how extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. But as a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that's all. Oh, goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So good to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it, but we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous effect in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to dear young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn from side to side, sweet child. Oh, there are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. Chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care twopence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
You may now address me as Aunt Augusta, Cecily, for the future.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out about each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may say almost an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew. But the fact is, I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He attended Oxford.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I've never had a brother, that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That's very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Sweet child, how old are you?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So, I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting again, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cecily Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an example in point. To my knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she turned the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you really wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to show a somewhat impatient nature. I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
That is not a destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both of these gentlemen have expressed desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? Oh, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I am afraid that, as things are now, Dr. Chasuble, it is of very little practical value to either of us.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing, and they savour the heretical views of the Anabaptists. If you will excuse me, Miss Prism is waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. Is this Miss Prism, a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask you what position she holds in your household?
Oh, I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You had never returned. A few weeks later, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with some shame that I do not know. I only wish that I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning that you mention, the day that is branded forever in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place a manuscript of a work of fiction that I had completed in my few off hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I will never forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
Where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, do not ask me.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in one of the cloakrooms of the larger railway stations in London.
Oh, which railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
Oh, I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
Oh, I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
Hope this will last. The suspense is terrible.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Oh, here on the lining is the stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that happened in Leamington. Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I have forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. Oh, the bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it returned to me so unexpectedly. It has been very inconvenient being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Oh, Mother!
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast the first stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Oh, Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there has been some error. Lady Bracknell can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted I had a brother? Oh, Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel. You'll have to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy. I admit I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Oh, good heavens! I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta. A moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That's settled. Oh, now what was the name I was given?
Being
Let's
the,
know the worst.
being the eldest, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
Oh, I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, though I'm sure he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but not until later years.
Algy, can you recollect our father's Christian name?
Oh, my dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists for the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Let's see. M. Generals. Malum, Maxbohm, Magley. My, what ghastly names they have. Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General, 1869. Christian names. Ernest John. I always told you my name was Ernest, didn't I, Gwendolyn? I mean, my name is naturally Ernest.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia?
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.